Now, when we talk about fear and anxiety, here's something we ought to know. Fear is not always a bad thing, right? There are good times that we ought to have fear, right? When we step out in front of a car and it hits a horn and we jump back, that's a good time to be fearful, right? There's lots of fear things so fear is not always a bad thing. In fact, sometimes it's a very normal thing. In fact, right now there's a lot of people experiencing normal fear. I'll give an example. Anybody out of new school this year? And those of you that aren't in a new school year, remember back when you went to a new school? I was talking to some kids last week, and I remember, I was thinking back, I went to this one elementary school for most of my elementary years. And it was all great, and you got to be friends and knew your connections by 6th grade. And then in 6th grade, in our school system, we went to what they called a senior elementary, which was 7th and 8th grade, which had a bunch of 2 or 3 other schools that got there. So everything got mixed up, right? And so by the second year, you're just sort of getting that figured out. And then you know what they did for us? They sent us to high school, where they had 3 or 4 more of these middle schools, these elementaries, the junior highs, whatever you want to call them, get thrown together, and you got to go through this whole process again. And so for sometimes, it's normal to have some fear. New school, maybe it's a new school year, right? And whether that's for the students or the teachers, that might be a reason to have a little fear, right? Maybe it's the same school, and it's going to be the same stuff, and you're just like, oh, man, I'm afraid how this is going to go. Maybe it's just this fear of another school year at that same school, and you know what's going to happen, and it's fearful and it's hard. Maybe a new job. You enter a new job, I think having a little fear is normal, right? How's this going to work? Am I going to get along? Is, everything they told me in the interview going to be true, or is it going to switch when I get there? And am I going to fit in? Am I going to fail? All that stuff. Maybe there's a fear in the same job, because it's like, I'm not sure this is going so good, and it's like, I just have fear going. I just always something. It's normal to have fear and uncertainty when something throws us a curveball and we're like, I don't know what's going on. But it's also normal to have fear when we have certainty. The diagnosis came in, and it's certain this is what we have. Now we have to get our mind around that, and there's a little fear of getting our mind around all that. And some of you are in the stages of where fear is a really normal thing, because you're doing things like take an exam that will determine the rest of your life. Going into the medical profession, maybe a lawyer, something like that, and you got to pass this test to get in, and maybe it's like your 5th time trying, because keep hope alive, right? But you're there, and you're like fearful it's not going to work. Maybe you're in college, right, and you're being told that you got to choose a career that you will do for the rest of your life. And you're thinking, the rest of my life? I mean, when I'm 30 years old, I'll still be doing this job? Or maybe you're having a little bit of fear, which is normal, when you're deciding they're the person we'll spend the rest of our life with. There ought to be a little bit of fear in that. I'm not saying you shouldn't go ahead and do it. I mean, everybody's got to, push through that fear. At least most of us have to kind of do that. But fear is an element of that, because it's like, because the guy or the woman who's standing in front of you, as they go through the thing, they're going to say something like this. Do you take this person for better, for richer, health? No, they're going to say some other words, right? And words that we don't really kind of think about. See, the reality is sometimes fear is a good thing, right? Can we agree with that? All right. But sometimes it isn't. And all of us have had experiences where fear has not been a good thing for us. Maybe it's robbed us of an opportunity. We didn't take the step ahead. We didn't do it because we were just afraid of what was going to cost, what would happen, maybe the embarrassment, maybe what I do if failure and fail and all that stuff. Maybe you've seen it not good in the way it's impacted some relationships you have. You're in a relationship with somebody, but there's a little fear involved with it, right? And it just kind of makes it like you're always on edge, always on eggshells, and it's not so good. It can impact our work. It can impact how we parent. It can impact, it can keep us up at night, right? The fear of what ifs, and we just go around and around. We can't seem to disengage this so the rest of us can go to sleep. Fear has ruined moments for us. Again, because we didn't step up, or because we stepped up and then we regretted what we said and we got fearful and we left. And for some of us, it literally has crippled our life. Because the fear and then has gotten so big of so much stuff that it's impossible, it seems like, to be able to function in life. And here's a quick biology lesson that you learned in high school probably. And it's simply this, that fear is part of our operating system. See, sometimes we think fear is bad. Fear is not bad. It's part of, from a Christian point of view, follower of Jesus point of view, this is the way we were created. You may not buy the whole creation stuff, but it is part of the system that we all have. And it's part, and in fact, you've heard this, you learned it in high school biology, right? We have the fight, we have the flight, and now I'm glad they've added the third one. Have you noticed recently they've added a third one? Because when I was a kid, it was just, you fight or flight. But I think they finally recognized, no, there's a third option, right? Because sometimes you get fearful and we pop back, right? Just like they do in the movies. Like we know the exact thing to do at the right time, right? We disarm all those bad stuff. Or we run, right? Another option. One to we say to fight another day or just to live another day. But there's also those other moments we all know that happens when fear hits in, right? And we just, thank you, freeze, right? And I'm glad they've recognized that because it doesn't always happen that we kind of push ahead or we run away. Sometimes we don't have the ability to do either of those things. And the truth is, anxiety is part of it too, is part of that operating system. And in fact, I would describe anxiety simply this way. It's a check engine light in our life. It's a warning signal. It's a warning signal that something's not good going on somewhere in us, and it's blinking at us. And for a lot of us, we do what we do with our cars when the check engine light comes on. We just keep going, that's right. I mean, if it was something really bad, the car would stop, right? But it's not, and some of us have gone out and bought the little box, the OBD box, stuck it in there, it tells us the code. It's like, oh, it's just this little thing. It's not so bad, and it's too hard to change, it's too expensive, and I'm just gonna keep driving this. I knew a guy who had an ingenious way of fixing his check engine light, and it wasn't to fix it. Got a little piece of black duct tape. He put it on there, and then you don't have to worry about it. Because it's nothing to see there, right? But isn't it true we do that with so much of life? We sort of ignore it, and then at some point, the light just stays on, and it gets to be too much. And it really leads me to ask this next question of all of us as we think about anxiety and whatever level it affects us. What if we're ignoring the underlying issues? I'm going to talk about that more in the coming weeks, but I think that's a key to dealing with anxiety is all these underlying issues, and we've let them get so big that they've just frozen us. And as I've talked to people who really struggle with anxiety, one of the things that adds to that whole struggle is a statement, is a thought, is a concept that they tell themselves, and it's this: I'm not supposed to feel like this. I'm not supposed to feel so overwhelmed. I'm not supposed to not be able to function. And I haven't said this to one of them yet because I'm trying to be helpful, but I'm going to say it to you, all right? Because I want to be helpful. And here's my question. Thank you. I got a I'm glad to at least get a right? Are you sure? Because we say, oh, no, I'm supposed to. Maybe we're not supposed to feel this much of it. Again, it's a warning system, right? It's an alarm system going off in our body saying, hey, 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 hey. And when you get to the hey level, it's like, I don't know what to do. There's just too much wrong, right? I mean, have you ever walked into a room that you need to clean and you're like, just close the door and move slowly away, right? I mean, our lives are like that at times, right? Where they're just, where do we start? And because we don't know where to start, the alarm is going off and it's just kind of crazy and chaotic and we're frozen that we can't do anything of it. And maybe it's just a reminder that we ought to feel some of this. It's warning us of something. We're just not supposed to feel this much of it that frees us. Maybe we need to deal with some underlying stuff. And like I said, we're going to talk about those later. But let's just go over some of the stuff that when we're dealing with anxiety, we're told. Here's some things we're told. We're told that it's a disease. Because, and I'm not being too critical of medical folks, but like literally everything is a disease, right? And there's a whole industry behind some of that stuff. And I think there's a lot of stuff. And I think, I don't want to wade into this too far, but I think some things are diseases, but some things we've categorized that as, because then we're going to fix it with a pill or we're going to fix it with a process. And while that may be part of it, it's not the totality. I don't think it's the totality. We're told that there's something wrong with us, right? Because if there wasn't something wrong, we wouldn't be having this, but so something's clearly wrong with us. We're told that something is broken in us. It's broken, and we just got to try to somehow fix it, right? We're told that only a professional can help. And I'm not downgrading professionals. You've heard from all of our pastoral staff about talking and going and seeing therapists or counselors at different stages of life. Some of us are continuing to go see folks. I think professionals help a lot. But I think there's some other things that we may need to think about. We're also told some great helpful advice like this. Because that's really helpful, isn't it? Or get over it. Or the thoughtful person. It's just stress. Yeah, but what does that do for me, right? Or I love this one. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. That's your problem. You feel sorry for yourself. Well, that makes me feel even sorry for myself, that I feel sorry for myself, right? But what if? What if that's not the whole story? See, what if the alarm isn't the problem? I should have set that up better because I wanted somebody to be thinking of that. But think about it. I mean, if anxiety is an alarm, it's the little flashing light in our life, and it's gone off, it's not the problem, is it? It's telling us, hey, there's something else going on, but we kind of think that's the problem, but that's not the problem. There's some other stuff. Because what if it's a symptom? Let me ask you different. What if it's a symptom? There's a great book I read in getting prepared for this month of messages. It's by a guy named Dr. John Deloney, Redefining Anxiety. It's a pretty helpful book. At least it seems like it's a helpful book to me. Notice how he describes this whole problem. He says, listen, the problem is the psychotic and destructive ecosystem that we call normal life. Because we got this thing, normal life, right? And it just, at times, gets crazy, and it's a system. It's just part of our life. And he goes on to describe it. That's filled with busyness, disconnection, cliches, influencers, and more of everything. He doesn't finish there. And now we're annoyed that our hearts and minds are sounding the sirens. He says the problem for a lot of anxiety is just our lives and the stuff that's going on in our lives. And while maybe taking a pill can be helpful, and sometimes taking a pill is the thing you need to do, long term, we need to address those issues. We need to go through the hard work of finding out what's going on in those alarm systems, breaking down, looking to see, what's going on that's making that little light flash in our lives. Because what if our body is letting us know we're just overwhelmed, overstressed, overstimulated, overpressured, overtired? Any of those sound familiar to you? And what if our body is saying, hey, this is what's going on, and the only way to deal with those is to deal with those? And maybe we need to rethink our anxiety, which is why we're spending a whole month talking about it. Now today, like I said, we're going to be sort of a flyover. But we're going to look at something that Jesus said that oftentimes people like me would bring into a situation like this when we're talking about anxiety and peace. And it's a famous statement from Jesus. But I want you to see the context of it, because when Jesus says that, it makes so much more sense in the context. Because if you just read the passage, just read the statement that Jesus said. And here's the statement. My peace I give you. You got it. And we go, then why don't I have it? And people like me say, well, it's simple enough. You don't have enough? Yeah, see, you've heard this before. You don't have enough faith. That's the problem. And I want you to know that's probably not the problem. But we only understand that when we see the setting when Jesus says these words. Well, I tell you all the time, you ought to read your Bible, right? But not just read for little statements. Read the story that's going on around it. See the context in it, because when the context happens, you go, oh, that was talking about this situation, not about every situation, right? So here's the setting. It's found over in John chapter 13. And the occasion is John, one of Jesus' closest followers. He recounts things that happened on the night before Jesus' arrest and crucifixion and all the stuff that happens there. And it happens, if you were here last week, we celebrated the Lord's Supper, this communion. It's that night. But John gives us a bunch of details that nobody else gives us. And he gives us a behind-the-scenes look at what Jesus was saying to people. And what he was trying to help them understand on his one last night together with them. Knowing this is their last night, he's saying stuff that he hopes is really important to them. And so, he has just got done, they've just had the meal, and in the process, Judas has got up and left the building. They've gone through all this stuff. They've had their arguments about who's the most important, who's the closest to Jesus, all that kind of stuff. And Jesus is trying to leave them with something really important. And he makes a statement that if you've been in a place like this, you've heard, or been in a place filled with this, you've heard at some point in your life. And here's what he says. Guys, I give you a new command. A new commandment is the language. Well, which would have been really unusual, but by now they recognize that Jesus is not some guy, but he's, somehow God, and that's a hard thing to get our minds around. But when he says commandment, only God can give commandments. And so here's the commandment that Jesus says. Here's the new one, and here's this commandment. He says, love each other. To which they all think, that's not new. I mean, we've been hearing this for our whole lives, right? I mean, this is in the part of our Bible we would call the Old Testament part. That love each other is part there. The issue wasn't about loving each other. It was always about the question of who's the other that we're supposed to love. Something that we still struggle with today, right? But let's get back to Jesus. Jesus on the night, he's trying to put something into the guys' minds, right? The 11 guys that are left, he says, guys, you gotta get this. And this is my command. This is my commandment. This is what I would need you to do. I need you to love each other. And then he tells them a step more to make it even more his command. He says, listen, you must love each other as I've loved you. To which they all go, oh, this is a whole different kind of love. Because love each other before, we try to get along, be nice to everybody. But now Jesus is saying this is like really love each other. Really have other people's best interests at heart. And there's a great quote that I ran across. I think it was a Facebook post. I don't post a lot on Facebook, but I lurk. I appreciate you guys posting stuff because I lurk sometimes and I see some great stuff. But I love this. A guy named Paulo, that guy, said, love is just a word until someone comes along and gives it meaning. Yeah, that's pretty good, right? And I think it makes a whole lot of sense when we think about Jesus saying, listen, this is my commandment. You got to love each other. But not just love each other. You got to love them like I love them. He came along to give love meaning. So now it takes on that greater meaning. And then Jesus makes that statement again. If you've been around a place like this, you've heard. And all people means how many? Everybody will know that you are my followers, you're my disciples, if you love each other. That how you and I treat each other, people are going to notice. To which Peter, as he always does, asked this question. He asked this extremely deep theological, meaningful question in this moment when Jesus is pouring out his heart and saying, guys, this is my new commandment. Don't miss this because this is getting added to all the others. This is really important. Here, I want you to notice what Simon Peter asked him. He says, because just before this, Jesus said, listen, guys, I'm going away, but God's going to send the Holy Spirit. You're going to be fine. Peter misses the whole thing. This statement that for 2,000 years has driven this thing we call Christianity, right? That how we treat each other will be a statement about how people around us see what God's done in our lives. That if we love one another, everybody's going to notice that. And Peter goes, forget that, Jesus. Let me ask you a really important question. Where are you going now? And this is one of those moments that I wish we had a video of this moment. Because in my mind, if I was Jesus, I'd be like rolling my eyes, face plant, like, I just gave you something really important, and you've just missed it all. And Jesus says back to him, listen, where I'm going, you cannot follow now, but you're going to follow later. Short answer is, Peter, you're missing the big picture, right? You can't go, but you're going to get there later. But let's get back to what's really important, to which Peter chimes in and says, Lord, why can't I follow you now? And then he ups his game, which Peter oftentimes did, because listen, I'm ready to die for you, right? I will lay down my life for you. I'm ready to go with you right now and die for you right now. And I think all the other disciples would have been right there with him, because they're like, yeah, the loving thing's great, Jesus, but what's going to happen to you? Because if you're not here, we're not talking about just leaving for a day or two. This is like, you're gone. If you're gone, what happens to us? And this is such important, this commandment of Jesus doesn't stick with the guys when he first says it. It goes over their head. To which Jesus next looks at the guys and says this, guys, don't let your hearts be troubled. Because Jesus could tell they were troubled, right? They are clueless. They're not sure what's going on. None of this is fitting the plan, what they thought was going to happen. And now they're troubled. Their anxiety level is rising quickly. And Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Now we could just take that statement, right? And I could say to you, if you have anxiety, don't let your hearts be troubled. Period. That's what Jesus said, so just do it. Would that be helpful? Thank you. You guys are quiet today. No, it wouldn't help. It might make me feel good because I spoke the word of Jesus to you. And I don't think when Jesus was saying this was a command, don't guys. He's just saying, listen guys, don't let this overtake you. Don't let your hearts be troubled. Listen, you trust, you believe in God. I want you to trust and believe in me, right? I know you guys believe in God, and I know you want to believe in me, but you struggle with that. So do that. And then he goes on and says, listen, I'm going, and I'm going to prepare a place. I'm going to come back, so don't worry about me not, forgetting about you guys. Everything's going to be fine. But a little bit later he says, I want you to know that I'm going to ask the Father, and he's going to give you another helper, another counselor, who's going to be with you forever. I've been here, but I'm leaving. I'm not, you're not seeing me for a long, long time, but you're going to have my presence. You're going to have God's presence still with you. And then he makes a great statement to these guys whose anxiety level is like, what are we going to do without Jesus? Yeah, this holy helper sounds really good, but Jesus isn't going to be here. And then Jesus says, listen, guys, I'm not going to leave you all alone like orphans. And in their setting, orphans were left literally all alone. If your parents died, you just lived on the street. There was no system. They were just out, right? He's saying, I'm not leaving you like orphans. I'm not leaving you without anything. I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back. And guys, I've told you all these things while I'm with you, right? I'm telling them why I'm with you. But here's what you need to know. The helper, the counselor is going to teach you everything, all things, and will cause you to remember all the things that I've told you. So I've been with you every day, but he's gonna help you remember all those things. This is gonna be good, guys. This is actually gonna be better for everybody. And then he makes that statement that we've heard before. I leave you peace. My peace I give you. This idea of peace that's to be good in us no matter what's happening around us, right? This idea to somehow have some peace inside while everything around us is just crazy and chaos. And Jesus says, I'm leaving this to you guys. But I want you to know, I'm not giving you as the world gives peace. And we all know what that means, right? And it's not talking, this is just about how life works out peace. We're at peace in life when everything is quiet, peaceful, calm. The kids were with the grandparents for like all summer. Right? I mean, that's the kind of peace that circumstances give us, right? Otherwise, it's crazy, it's hectic, we're going all over the place. But he says, listen, I'm not giving it that way. And then he comes back again around being troubled and having anxiety. He says, listen, so don't let your hearts be troubled or afraid. And I think there's a couple of clues in there that we're going to look at in coming weeks. But when Jesus says don't let, he's telling us that there is this ability within ourselves that we have to choose. Sometimes that choice is really hard. Sometimes it's really hard because the alarms in our lives are going off at such a level that it's impossible, it seems like, to quiet those things because so many things are happening at one time. But he says, listen, don't let this is a choice you have to make. This is this decision to not let your hearts be troubled or afraid. See, Jesus knew there would be things that would shake them. He knew what was happening. And he had tried to tell them what was happening, but it just was not making any sense. Before we get too hard on them, haven't you had somebody tell you something before that didn't make any sense to you? That they came back later and said, I told you that, and you said, oh, yeah, you did, yeah. But you know, it just kind of got lost on you. I mean, he knew that he was going to get arrested, and that was going to be a whole scene. He knew that he was going to get brought in front of these, really important rulers, right? These political figures, these people that literally held life and death in their hands. And he knew a lot of them were guys that were going to run away. Their fear was going to be, fight or flight, and they were taking the flight one. And then when he's killed, and for the handful that were there and the others that either heard the story or kind of came by and sneaked a peek later, he knew that in their mind, all their hopes and dreams were dying. Things that would shake them. And here's something not to miss. Jesus wanted them to know that they didn't have to be troubled or overcome, even in that moment. See, the peace Jesus offered wasn't an immediate thing. Now, before you push back and then say, well, hold on, Mike, Jesus said, I give you my peace. That sounds like a right now, you can tap to it anytime. Yes, you can. But it wasn't an immediate thing, and it wasn't because of him. He was saying, it's here for you guys. It was because of them. They couldn't understand it. They couldn't tap into it because they were just shooken up by all the stuff that was happening in life. And after telling them, guys, don't be troubled. I'm there for you. He says this. I've told you this now, before it happens, so that when it happens, you will believe. One of my favorite statements of Jesus in this context. Because he's saying, listen, guys, I'm telling you now before it happens, but I know between now and when it happens, you're going to be lost. You're going to be in a fog. You're going to be like, oh, right? But when it happens, I want the pieces to fall into place for you. I want the chance for you to experience peace that's beyond what you guys can think. Peace that's so different from, how everything else needs to have peace. Peace that's not calm and quiet. Peace that's chaotic, but peace inside here, no matter what's going on around us. Because it would take them some time to experience that peace. He said, listen, I'm going to tell you now, so when it happens, you're going to believe. Not that you'll know ahead of time, but that when it happens, you'll go, oh yeah, we did know that. But we couldn't comprehend it. It wasn't helping us in this moment, but now it's making sense. And he goes on and says, listen, I'm not going to talk with you much longer. And there's a reason, because the ruler of this world is coming. He's using kind of this, vague language where he's saying, hey, things are coming to a head. Things are coming to a point. And we don't have a lot of time left. In fact, he didn't go like that because he didn't have a watch. But, It's happening. And things are going to change, but things aren't going to change. Because I want you to know, guys, he has no power. He has no claim. He has no hold. He has nothing over me. Even though in like 36 hours, it's going to seem like he did, he doesn't. But guys, here's what you need to know. The world must know that I love the Father. So I do exactly what the Father told, what the Father commanded me to do. Guys, the world needs to know that I was fulfilling what I was sent here to do. But this isn't the end. And don't think my death signals that he won this thing. In fact, it's going to remind him and everybody else that he lost this thing. Because no longer can death be held out over any of us. That death is the end, and Jesus say, no, death is not the end. And I'm going to show you it's not the end. I've raised some people to life, but now I'm going to raise myself to life. And I'm going to be dead, right? We talked about this last week. Not just dead, but I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be in the grave for like, it's 3 days. It's portions of 3 days, but it's a long enough period that I'm dead. But when I come back, it's going to remind people that this was about more than just some really good guy dying for what he thought was a really good cause. See, later when Jesus rose from the dead, it all began to make sense. But even then, it was not immediate. When they find that the tomb is empty, some of them are really, really excited. They're all really confused, and they're still hiding out. It would take them a few days to begin to process that, to experience that. But it will all begin to make sense, especially what he said about peace and fear. That when fear is the controlling force in our life, it pushes out any possibility of peace in our life. But peace and fear can coexist. Because fear is part of our operating system. It's the way God designed us. So peace doesn't do away with fear. It just says it tempers fear. It lets us handle fear. It helps us deal with fear. See, what if faith is more than believing we can, but acting that we can? When Jesus says, I'm giving you my peace, we can believe that, or we can begin to act on that. And for those of us that wrestle with anxiety, let me just say a couple things in closing today. Anxiety is not our identity, even though people have put that on us, right? And it's not our destiny. It's not where we have to end up. It's not going to be the story of the rest of our life. It doesn't have to be. See, what if we really can experience peace? And what if it's a process? What if it takes time and some work? Because if it is a process and it does take some time and some work, the question really becomes to us, will we stick with the process? Will we begin the process before even sticking with it, right? Will we take the time and do the work? Just like with our cars. We can keep putting duct tape on it. We can pull the electrical wires so that light doesn't shine anymore, but it doesn't change the underlying fact that there's something going on. Until we get our hands dirty and get in there and fix it, or hire somebody to help come diagnose us and help us fix it, nothing's going to change. But I want all of us to know that God doesn't love us because we're perfect. He loves us because we're his child. And next week, we'll talk more about all that.